Special treat this morning, one of the greatest athletes of all time and the fastest woman in the world. We are joined by Tatyana McFadden. Tatyana, thank you so much for coming on. It is so great to have you.
Well, thanks for having me.
What a remarkable story. Please share with us a little bit about your background. I think incredible for you to come from a Russian orphanage and have to grow up with spina bifida and eventually sue the state of Maryland to try to get some progress in a special place when it comes to athletes with disabilities.
I was born with spina bifida, and so I didn't have any medical treatment for the first 20 days of my life. And so it was a miracle that I survived. And then shortly after my surgery, I was put into orphanage number 13. That's where I lived there for the first 6 years of my life. And I didn't have any medical treatment and no schooling. And so I did the best thing that I could do, and I got around and I scooted across the floor, or I crawled or walked on my hands. But for me, my attitude was that I wanted to be just like all the other kids. I wanted to go where they were going. I didn't think of myself as anyone different. And then the 6th year changed my life when my mom happened to walk through the door on a pure business trip, not looking to adopt. And so that changed my life forever, coming to the U.S. And a lot of first things happened, getting involved with sports, going to school. I had several surgeries growing up. So yeah, it's been a life journey, but it's been a really good one.
17 medals in the Paralympics, including 7 golds. Like I said, if I was to try to share your story with someone else, I don't think they would believe it.
Yeah, it's definitely feels like a movie, right? I started my Paralympic journey in 2004 as the youngest Paralympic athlete at the time, and I started with just 3 events. So I added an event in each games, and each games got better, and each games changed. In Athens when I came back, I there was no celebration for the Paralympic athletes, and I felt like there was especially no equal pay, and we're finally getting equal pay going into Tokyo 2021 games. I feel now more so as an elite athlete than I ever have, and I say that because especially coming home from Athens, it's like people didn't even know I went, and then your medals didn't count for equal pay. And then in Beijing, it was better. We got crowd support. We got a few more sponsorship, but nothing was like the London, where the attitude and perception really changed in the Paralympics. And they paralleled the Olympics and Paralympics, so they called it like the OP, and that was huge. That was like the game changer, the start of the tipping point, the domino effect of the Paralympics. And then we hit a little rough spot in Rio, but it turned out to be a fabulous games. But I really think that this movie is going to help. I think it's going to help that it's going to change the attitude and perception of disability while talking about the history of the Paralympics.
I know you have a book about your life, and now, of course, the fans at home can check out this Netflix original documentary, Rising Phoenix, as you mentioned. And you're not just featured in this film, but you're also a producer for the film.
Yes, which is crazy that I got asked to be producer. So 4 years ago, I was talking to Greg Nugent. He works for the IPC, International Paralympic Committee, and we met very first time in Rio, and we after one of my gold medal wins, and we were just discussing about the Paralympics and the history of it, and where it's been and where it's the direction that it's headed. And we said, he said, "Oh, it should be a movie," and I said, "Yes, like it should be a movie." I completely 100% agree, because it's a story that's never has been told before. And I was like, it needs to be told, because as we're trying to promote the film, we need this history like to be seen by the world. And he was like, "Yep." And I was like, "I'll do anything to like support this film, if it's possible." So it was like a fantasy. It was like we just talked about it. It wasn't anything like concrete yet. And then 2 years ago, I got a call from him, and he was like, "So I think we're going to be making this movie happen." And I was like, what? Like, seriously? He was like, yep, we've been talking to different, like, for people to buy the film. I'm really happy that Netflix bought it. They really believed in the film as much as we did, and they were really, really excited about it. So it was the right fit. And yeah, and then they asked me if I wanted to be producer on it, and they could ask anybody, right? And they said, well, we really admire like your advocacy for the sport, your advocacy for people with disabilities. So my job was to, if we're going to have a documentary featured of all these Paralympic athletes, having them tell their stories, if we're going to be telling the history of the Paralympics, if we're speaking about equality, if we're speaking about disability community, well, we need to hire people with disabilities to work on this film. I feel like the common theme is that like disability is such a taboo thing, and I want to change that. And I feel like also people have a view of what disabled people should look like. And I was like, I also want to change that perception.
I think it's great too that the film is incredibly accessible globally. I mean, 30 languages, it's been dubbed many times. So it's really, you guys did a great job of trying to make it accessible to so many different people across
Yeah.
across the globe.
Yeah, it's closed caption in 31. It's in 30 different languages and it's dubs in 10. So that's huge. And I think that was huge for Netflix as well. So again, when we talk about accessibility of this film, that was really important as well in our discussion of like when we were going to release this film. Yeah.
Why do you think there is a misconception about para athletes?
Well, I think it's one is the history of disability. In the United States, it was, a lot of people with disabilities were either on the streets begging with a cap in hand, or they were put in institutions. And so, and that wasn't, an ADA is only 30 years old, and I'm 31, so it's fairly new. So when you talk about like that, perspective, and then you have the Paralympics on top of that, it's like people are trying to learn so much. And so you have to kind of break the stereotypes with disability, physical disabilities, and you have to break the that helps to break the stereotypes for the Paralympics. And media is helping. So we're having more and more media, which is amazing, which is what we need. For me, like I use my social content in such a good and positive way to be able to tell my story, to share about my sport. Marathons have also really helped for me to even talk about the sport even further. So we still have a long way to go, but it's a lot better than what it used to be.
And I believe that Rising Phoenix will go a long way to try to break some of those misconceptions.
I think so. And it's a perfect time to have this film because we're obviously in this global pandemic and the Paralympics and the Olympics are postponed. So it gives everybody a chance to kind of, to watch it. Second, people are thirsty for sports. They're thirsty for good stories. And it's the perfect time to sit down and watch it on weekends or right after work or, in your own home.
I also think, Tatyana, that you guys couldn't have picked a better name for the film. I know sometimes that might not be considered a big thing, but this concept of, Phoenix is explored early in the documentary, this idea of, live and die and burn and live again. And I feel so many of the athletes in the documentary kind of symbolize that, having that difficulty that we talked about. Life is a fight, the struggles that come with so many of these challenges, but being able to overcome them.
Yeah, exactly. It was the perfect name. So when Bebe mentioned that it was her nickname that she was given, it was like, yep, that's perfect, because again, it resonates with Jean Baptiste's story. Every athlete's story, I feel like we all go through, this fire, a death experience kind of at one point, or literally for some. So it's fitting and it's suiting for the film. Yeah.
Well, I really appreciate you taking the time and definitely strongly suggest this documentary to many people at home. They should check it out on Netflix, Rising Phoenix. Thank you so much, Tatyana.
Thank you. Have a good day.